You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome to CBT News. Today we're joined by the executive analyst for iSeeCars.com, Mr. Karl Brauer, to give us a recap of what we saw this year in 2023 and his predictions for what might lie ahead. So, Karl, thank you so much for joining us on the show again.
Absolutely. Always fun to be on with you guys.
Sure. So bring us up to speed on what we've seen this year with regard to EV sales. Where do we stand?
Yeah, we looked at the numbers and the kind of the market share that was going on across the country. And, a lot of people are excited because they feel like the market share has gone up compared to maybe a year ago. But it didn't look like it went up as rapid in the past 12 months, as rapidly as it had the previous 12 months. Mm-hmm. More importantly, when we broke it down by state, what we really saw was that states like Oregon or California or Washington State that have between 7 and 10% EV market share, those are the three highest in the country, are also growing the slowest. And when we looked at the states that had moved up the most in market share, they were usually states that were at 0 to 3%.
There's a lot of room to grow there.
Yeah, and so it suggests what I think we're going to start to really recognize, which is that there's a percentage of people in any given location that are happy to buy an EV. Maybe they have a multi-car garage, they can put in a 240 charger for overnight charging. They can afford a multi-car fleet, so they can have a car that can get them long distances without having to worry about recharging, but just fill up with gas, but they can still run around locally in the EV. And once that group buys in, it gets much harder to get all the people living in multi-domain complexes like condos and apartments. And of course, all the people who look at an EV and still see they have to pay more money for an EV versus an equivalent gasoline car, especially when most people finance their new car purchase or even their used car purchase. And if you pay more, you're paying more to borrow the money that it costs you to get that more expensive EV.
That's right. So it's much more, or it's at least a substantial amount more all the way across. Financing it, buying the car, charging it, or at least trying to find a charging station. I mean, you got range anxiety still in there. There's a lot of concerns, but these are the vehicles that are starting to, pile up on the dealers' lots, right?
Absolutely. And we look at things like days on market. EVs went from about a 20-day average to a 57-day average.
Ouch.
And even, hybrids went from 20 to 37. That's almost double. But EVs went from 20 to 57, almost tripling how long it took to sell the average one. The other thing that we saw that was really telling just in this last month, the most recent study we did, the average used car is down 5.1% from a year ago. So, down a little bit.
Sure.
The average hybrid vehicle is down 9%, something like 9%. And the average EV is down 33.7%.
Oh my gosh. Wow. How is it that, in your opinion, how is it that OEMs have gotten this so wrong? You would think that with their tremendous resources available at their fingertips and the research that they can do and the market research to see, first and foremost, is the market truly there? If we build these things and invest in this technology and ship them to dealerships, are they going to be accepted by consumers out there? And it almost sounds like they really missed the mark on this.
Well, don't forget that there's not just natural forces on them, okay? Normally, how this works is they have to have somewhat of a prediction of how many people they think will buy a given vehicle or a given type of vehicle, and then they order or build that many. The manufacturer builds them and the dealership orders them. There are all sorts of incentives, as we know, by the government to try to get these electric vehicles produced and sold. And so I think there was a kind of rush to live up to what the government was telling them they were supposed to do on the manufacturing and dealer side. And a production capacity was upped and ordering was upped at the dealerships.
Yep.
And they didn't necessarily check with the consumer on whether or not this was the direction they were ready to go.
Right.
No
I guess that's what I'm referring to is how did they miss that so much? How did they miss that mark to say, we're building millions of EVs here, shipping them to dealerships, and guess what? The consumer doesn't want them at that rate.
Right. but that's why I think it was the government. I think it was the incentives. They were like, look, we're supposed to do this. We have to do this. There's really no fighting this. So let's just go ahead and agree to it.
I got you.
And what has changed, Jim, is this realization that you're talking about. Now we're hearing everything from a pullback in the introduction speed of these vehicles to the investment in the production capacity of both vehicles and battery plants. You know, there's pretty much an industry-wide second, analysis, taking a breath and saying, wait a second here, maybe we want to reevaluate this. And what I think is fascinating personally is that I've been watching Toyota get, kind of tisk, shame on you from various people in the automotive industry about not being aggressive enough about EVs.
I know.
And my quote to them all the time, Jim, was, you can bet against Toyota if you want. Everyone who's ever done that in the past has lost, but if you want, maybe you'll win this time. Go ahead. And here we are. And Toyota's suddenly looking like, once again, the smartest manufacturer in the room, because they weren't going to go all in on EVs when everything that they were seeing told them that was a losing proposition.
I know. They did it right, or at least it looks like it's proving to be the right approach. And because consumers, it's funny, as somebody said to me, I'd love to buy an EV. I would buy an EV tomorrow if the infrastructure was there. And it's not there. So don't blame me for not buying an EV. Blame the system. Blame the OEMs, and blame the government for failing to put in the necessary infrastructure for consumers to feel comfortable about buying an EV. So it's like we put the cart before the horse on this thing, and we did kind of a ready, shoot, aim approach, right?
100%, Jim. And I've been telling people, they've been asking me for years, when are EVs going to sell like traditional cars? And they said, when they're just like traditional cars.
That's right.
What's a traditional car do?
That's right.
It goes hundreds of miles on a single tank or single piece of fuel. You can go hundreds of miles before you have to refuel it in whatever form. And when you do have to refuel it, it's really easy. They're all over the place.
That's right.
And it takes 5 to 10 minutes. When EVs offer all that, when they can go 2 to 3 or 400 miles even, and then they're super easy to refuel, big air quotes around refuel, and it takes 5 to 10 minutes. They'll sell just as well as gasoline cars until all those factors are met. Well, Carl, we can't expect. Well, you can maybe not expect. The government can maybe not expect. Guess what the average consumer does expect?
Yep.
And the other fascinating thing, Jim, has been the hybrid situation.
Yeah.
Because hybrids were like the EVs of 20 years ago, right?
Yep.
Prius came out, and there were a certain amount of people who immediately thought the Prius was cool, but there were plenty of people, and it's like, well, I don't know, do you have to plug this thing in? I don't want to get stuck and all. They had a lot of the same thoughts that EVs had. But Prius and, most hybrids, as you know, Jim, you don't have to plug them in. And if it's a plug-in hybrid, you can get EV-like use out of them for between 20 and 50 miles. But once that runs out and you have to turn on the engine comes on and you just keep driving.
That's right.
And
That's
right.
It's a beautiful thing.
People are loving these things. So 7 of the 10 fastest selling cars in the month of October, just last month or a month and a half ago now, were hybrids. Hybrids were 7 of the 10 fastest selling cars.
Wow.
They're holding their value well.
That's great.
People are loving them.
Yeah.
So they're the opposite, and of the first 5 of the 10 vehicles that had dropped the most in value in the past year were EVs. You had the Leaf and the Bolt and 3 of the 4 Teslas. Everything but the Model Y was in there in terms of lost value.
Wow.
So this dichotomy between hybrid and EV, I'm finding very fascinating. And what I feel like is enough of the car buying public has figured out the hybrid thing.
Yeah.
And they have said, look, all you do is you pay a little bit more, plus the prices come down. There used to be a big delta between a traditional vehicle and the hybrid version, but they've got the prices down on that. So now you can spend a little more for the hybrid version, get substantially better fuel efficiency, and never have range anxiety. And enough of the population's figured it out. These things are selling now. The hybrids have broken through to mainstream, and they're
it's
selling
like
really well.
I would liken it to technology back in the early 80s. When cell phones came out, they were that big brick, and they were very expensive. If you remember, they're like $3,000 to $5,000 for the first version of a cell phone. And then the reception wasn't, obviously you didn't have towers, so that was a little sketchy. It was 40 to 50 cents a minute, depending on when you made the phone call and what have you. And everyone was like, forget it. Nobody's going to do this. And to your point, when are we going to sell EVs? When are you going to sell these cell phones? Well, when it's $150 a month, it's this big, okay? And everybody now walks around with a cell phone, a smartphone, their computer at their hip, camera, the whole deal. So that will, to your point, that will come when the infrastructure is there, and there's charging stations on every corner, and they'll, there's nothing to worry about. Maybe the cost will come down because the volume will be there, but
right.
It's just going to take.
No, you're 100% right, Jim. I mean, a good way to think of it is like what you just described is, when will cell phones make my life easier?
Right.
For almost and at a price that is too good to pass up for how much easier they make my life.
That's right.
Same thing with electric vehicles.
Yeah.
When they make my life easier,
that's right,
at a price I can't deny, I'll go buy one without hesitation.
I know.
Right now, do they make people's lives easier?
Yep.
I don't think they make most people's lives easier. They cost more. They're more you got to spend more on the interest rates to finance them, and then you got to hope that you don't run out when you're not near your home charger, because you're hoping that if you do, there's a place to recharge. There aren't 3 people in line in front of you. The pay system works. It's not been vandalized and it's broken. There's all these issues. Is that making people's lives easier? No. So people aren't buying them.
That's right. That's right. See, we just settled the whole EV issue right here in this conversation.
Got it all figured out.
So that's fantastic. Karl Brauer, executive analyst for iSeeCars.com. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. We very much appreciate it. I know that a lot of people that watch our show get a lot out of your visit with us. So thank you.
Always fun being on with you guys.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.